Hi, so in this video what we are going to do is that we want to create Heroku deployment for our CUBA application, and in version 7.2 of CUBA it was actually getting a little bit easier, and so it should just take us a couple of minutes of creating a running application with a proper database in the cloud based on Heroku. And first thing is that you have to have Heroku like login, yeah. And secondly, it will also help you if you have a GitHub username. And what you can do here is that you can go ahead here and press this fork button on this sample application. And with that, you have basically created a copy of this application in your personal namespace. And now what we are going to do is that we say, okay, we want to create a new application, and then we call it, CUBA Clinic Heroku. In this case, I want to put it to the European region. And what we now do is that we have to connect the Heroku application to the GitHub repository. And the way we do it is that luckily Heroku has native integration with GitHub, so what we can do here is say connect to GitHub and search for a particular repository name. And if I search for this name, then it should find my particular repository here, and I can say please connect to it. And next thing what we are going to do is that we enable automatic deployment. So this means that whenever I do a push to my GitHub repository, then Heroku will go ahead and deploy the latest changes to the running production system. Okay, let's enable that. And next thing what we have to do, let's double check here. So we have everything set up. So the next thing is that we want to create the Postgres database. And the way it works is you have here this section called resources and add-ons. And add-ons are like, you can have like message queues, but also databases or email integration or whatever. In this case, we want to search for Postgres. And then it asks me what plan of Postgres installation I would like to have. Here in this case, I will go with the hobby dev variant, which is free. Now it is connected to the application. So this means that Heroku will pass in basically a URL which contains the credentials as well to the Heroku Postgres installation in my running application. And this is how I can connect in the CUBA application then to the Postgres database. So, and this is where we have to go and take a look at what we need to configure on the CUBA application side. So first thing is that we have to define this particular Gradle task, and in the sample app it's already done. So you can go here in the build.gradle and see that we have this stage Gradle task, and it will basically be executed by Heroku when it sees a new push was performed against the GitHub repository. And this will basically set up everything and deploy the application. And second thing is that we have to tell CUBA how to connect to the Heroku database. And the way it works is that we have here a file which is called prod-app.properties, and this is a particular properties file which contains configuration properties only for the Spring Profile production, or prod in this case. And we will use that Spring Profile when we run the application in Heroku. I will tell you in a second about it. But first thing what we have to do here is that we want to activate automatic database update. So every time the application starts, it should update the database in case there are structural changes to be made. And secondly, here we are using the new data source provider capabilities to define that we actually want to set the credentials in the application properties files itself for the database. And the way it works here is that we can configure this JDBC URL for the data source. And instead of hard coding that, we will just here use this environment variable called JDBC database URL. And this is actually what is injected by the Heroku environment. And with that, we have configured everything already which is necessary for the application to run on Heroku. And then the last thing here is that we have to create a particular file which is called proc file, and this proc file lives in the root directory of the application project here. And what it basically says, it's just expressing that it should run the Tomcat in a particular way. And here I configured a particular Spring profile to be active, and this is this prod. And with that, this particular configuration file gets taken into consideration and is used for configuring all the values that are necessary. So this means that the next thing that we can do is just do some change on the GitHub repository. Yeah. And in this case, I just added a change in the README. And basically what I can do now is to commit these changes. And push the changes to the GitHub repository. Now it's updated. And okay, so now when we reload the page, we should hopefully see the change here that I did. Okay, that's fine. And then the next thing is that if we go here, we should see that a build is in process now. We can go ahead here and take a look at the build logs. And so basically now starts, here you actually see it starts like this Gradle task stage. And it takes like a couple of seconds. In the meantime, I can show you how to take a look at the logs. If you have configured the Heroku CLI, you can perform the logs command and give it a tail so that it will only give you the latest information, and always update those on the fly. Okay, so build is started by user. Okay, nothing has happened here. You already see that the build is being executed. And there are like other settings that you could define. So for example, if you want to have a particular extra SSL certificate or want to have a custom domain, you can configure those here. Currently the default value is just this particular URL, which is basically expressed as the name of the application that I defined, and then herokuapp.com. Okay, so now in a couple of seconds everything should be deployed, and then what happens then is that we will see here in the logs the restart of the Tomcat application. It's also possible to manually deploy a particular branch if you would like to do it without any kind of a change of the source code. This is also possible. Or alternatively, there are various other ways on how you can deploy into the Heroku. So GitHub is really just one example of how to do it. Probably it's the easiest one, but there are other variants of how you could do it. You can, for example, use the Heroku CLI to push to Heroku directly, or you could use a container registry-based approach where you would basically pack your application into a container and then run it on top of Heroku. So what we see here now is that the build basically was performed. We can actually take a look at the overview here once again. So everything seems to be fine. Yeah, so it was deployed. When we take a look at the build logs, everything seems to be working. And here it started up the application for the first time. Here you see that it actually called the init scripts and performed them against the database. So this means that we can go ahead here now and say open application, and we should see the running CUBA Clinique based on Heroku. And this is basically it. And now every time I do another change into the GitHub, I can have a dedicated new deployment into the production system.